So, let's talk about how a powerful kingdom falls. We're diving into the story of Numidia, a powerhouse in North Africa that was brought to its knees. But here's the thing, this isn't your typical story of conquest. This is about how a kingdom wasn't just beaten by Roman soldiers, but was basically devoured from the inside out by Roman politics. And that gives us two very, very different versions of the same story. You know, if you read the official Roman version of the story, it's pretty straightforward. You've got this lawless, power-hungry king, Jugurtha, who basically forced a reluctant Rome to go to war. But the reality? Oh, it was way more complicated. It was a desperate fight for survival, a struggle for independence that got tangled up in the corruption, the ambition, and eventually the civil wars of its superpower neighbor. Okay, so our story really kicks off with this one guy, a Numidian prince who probably understood the Roman threat better than anybody. A man whose ambition was about to set his entire kingdom on a collision course with the most powerful republic in the world. His name was Jugurtha. And here's the thing you've got to understand about Jugurtha. He wasn't some stranger to Rome, not at all. He'd actually served in the Roman army, and he was good at it, earning the respect of top generals. Get this, his uncle, the king, was basically pressured by the Romans to adopt him and name him a co-heir. But of course, the second the old king dies, that whole power-sharing deal with his two cousins just completely falls apart. And you see, this wasn't just some petty family drama over who gets the crown. No, this was a deep political disagreement about the future of their country. Jugurtha had seen how Rome worked from the inside, and he was wary. He knew their whole system was built on conquering people and taxing them. His cousins, though, they seemed perfectly fine with being friendly little client kings. Jugurtha wanted an independent Numidia. They were ready to just roll with Rome. So what does Jugurtha do? He moves fast, and he is brutal. Step 1, he has one cousin killed. Step 2, he goes after the other one. But look at step 3. This is where it gets interesting. When his other cousin, Adherbal, runs to Rome for help, Jugurtha doesn't panic. He follows, with bags of cash. He knows the Roman political system is for sale, and he literally bribes his way to a favorable ruling. But that's not enough. In step 4, he attacks again, and this time, he massacres Roman citizens. And with that, he finally crossed a line that even a corrupt Senate couldn't just brush under the rug. Yeah, the massacre at Cette, that was the final straw. Rome declared war, but they were about to find out that Jugurtha, the very soldier they had trained and admired, was going to be one of the toughest enemies they had ever faced. Look, Jugurtha was no fool. He knew he couldn't go toe-to-toe with the Roman legions in a straight-up fight, so he didn't even try. Instead, he decided to bleed them dry, one cut at a time. He used guerrilla tactics, rallying local tribes who knew the land, and then just melting back into the desert. He frustrated and humiliated the Roman war machine, and it all came to a head in 110 BCE with this incredible night attack where he completely wiped out a Roman army and told its general he had 10 days to get out of Numidia. Well, Rome was furious, absolutely livid, so they stopped messing around and sent in the big guns. New commanders, a guy named Metellus, and his incredibly ambitious second-in-command, Gaius Marius, showed up with fresh, disciplined legions. They changed tactics, they started taking cities one by one, and slowly, they wore down Jugurtha's support. The tide finally started to turn, and for the first time, Jugurtha was on the one. Okay, so Jugurtha is on the ropes. He's weakened, and he plays his last, desperate card. He flees to the neighboring kingdom of Mauritania to get help from its king, Bocchus, who also just so happened to be his father-in-law. This was it. This was his one shot to raise a new army and keep the fight going. But here's where the story takes a turn. See, Rome's real weapon wasn't always the sword. A young, clever politician named Lucius Cornelius Sulla started secret talks with King Bocchus, and Sulla offered him a much better deal than family loyalty, a big piece of Jugurtha's kingdom. Bocchus took the deal. He betrayed his own son-in-law and handed him over to the Romans. So the key point here is, Jugurtha wasn't beaten in a battle. He was beaten by a backroom deal. So, they drag Jugurtha back to Rome, parade him through the streets in chains, but before they execute him, he supposedly says these famous words. And man, does it just nail the entire conflict. He used Roman corruption to get ahead, and in the end, that same corruption is what destroyed him. He saw the rot at the heart of the Republic. So Jugurtha is out of the picture. But that political poison he talked about, it wasn't just in Numidia. It was festering right in the heart of Rome itself. In fact, the seeds of Numidia's final destruction were actually planted in Rome's own chaotic, spiraling internal politics. After the war, Numidia was left weakened, smaller, and under the rule of a puppet king the Romans thought they could easily control. And for about 50 years, things kind of settled down in the region. But during that same half-century, back in Rome, man, things were about to boil over. All right, quick Roman politics 101, because you need to know this. You basically had two big factions. First, the optimates. Think of them as the old money establishment, the traditional aristocrats trying to hang on to their power. Then you had the populares, the People's Party, who were arguing that Rome's massive poverty problem could be solved by, well, by more conquest. Go conquer new lands and give that land to the poor.
And this whole political mess gets really personal. Remember the two guys who brought down Jugurtha? Well, Marius, the brilliant general, was the hero of the populares, and Sulla, the slick diplomat, was a champion of the optimates. Marius was furious that Sulla got all the credit for capturing Jugurtha. And get this, Sulla actually had that betrayal scene engraved on his personal ring. Talk about petty. Their hatred for each other would literally spark Rome's first major civil wars.
Okay, fast forward a few decades. Rome's political volcano is about to erupt again, and this time, the very last independent king of Numidia, a man named Juba I, is going to make a fateful bet that will seal his kingdom's doom for good. And this time, the fight is between two of the biggest names in Roman history, Julius Caesar, representing the populares, versus Pompey the Great for the optimates. After a bunch of battles, Pompey's side starts losing, and his allies, what's left of the optimate faction, flee to the one place they know they have a powerful friend, King Juba's Numidia. Suddenly, Rome's civil war was right on his doorstep. So you have to ask, why on earth would Juba get involved in Rome's civil war? Well, he had three really good reasons. First, a debt of honor. Pompey had helped his dad years ago. Second, a personal grudge. Caesar had once publicly insulted him. But the third one was the most important. Political survival. He knew that Caesar's Popularis party paid its bills by conquering new lands to give to Roman colonists. For Juba, a win for Caesar meant the end of an independent Numidia. And at first, Juba and his Roman allies do pretty well. But then, Caesar himself lands in Africa. And, just like Sulla did to Jugurtha, Caesar used diplomacy to completely isolate his enemy. He cut a deal with Juba's western neighbor, another, King Bocchus. And, just like that, Juba was trapped. He had Bocchus attacking from the west, Caesar to the east, and rebellions popping up in the south. His situation was absolutely hopeless. After the final battle, when Caesar's forces crushed the optimates, Juba knew it was all over. But he had a long memory. He remembered what happened to Jugurtha, the shame, the humiliation of being dragged through Rome in chains. He decided he would not suffer the same fate. And so, the last king of independent Numidia chose to take his own life. And just like that, with Juba's death, the story of an independent Numidia comes to an end. What came next was the final absorption of the kingdom into the Roman machine, a process that would change North Africa forever. So what happens to the kingdom? Well, it gets carved up like a feast. As you can see, a massive chunk was just annexed directly by Rome and renamed Africa Nova. Literally, the new Africa. Other parts were handed out to Roman soldiers as new colonies, which is exactly what Caesar promised his supporters. And that last slice, it was given to King Bocchus as his reward for betrayal. See a pattern here? And this wasn't just about redrawing maps. This was the start of what we call Romanization. That's the long, slow process where, over centuries, Roman culture, Roman language, and Roman laws would gradually replace the old Numidian way of life. The kingdom wasn't just conquered. It was almost like it was being slowly written over. So, that brings us right back to the big question we started with. There's no doubt Rome's legions were incredibly strong, but the story of Jugurtha and then of Juba shows something else, doesn't it? It shows a kingdom that was expertly played, repeatedly betrayed, and in the end just swallowed whole by a political system whose internal conflicts and corruption were just as deadly as any army. So, what do you think was the real killer? Rome's strength or its corruption?